Yo guys, today we're going to talk about my first impressions of Professor Layton versus Phoenix Wright. And when I say first impressions, I just mean my thoughts based on my first playthrough of the game. I'll definitely play through the game a second time when I do reviews for the Witch Trials as a part of my Ace Attorney reviews, but for now, I want to talk about what I just played through. Because man, this game is a unique experience, and I really need to talk about it right now. This will be a spoiler review, so I'll say it right now, spoilers for PL versus AA. I won't have spoilers for other games in either series, but I might mention non-spoiler things about them. Alright, the first thing I want to talk about is the Witch Trials. These were really interesting. I liked the use of magic, they set some rules of how magic is used, and they used the magic as evidence, and these made for some unique cases. Like, you would not have cases like this in the other Ace Attorney games, because you got things like invisibility and creating portals. So yeah, I thought using magic was a genius idea, and it really left me intrigued. I'll go through my thoughts about each case, and funnily enough, case 1 isn't even a witch trial. That being said, I did like case 1. My initial impression of it is that it's one of the better tutorial cases in the series. The case had me engaged from start to finish. I liked a lot of the contradictions, and I think it was interesting that the case was left on a cliffhanger. It was a pretty strong cliffhanger because we essentially didn't get a culprit, so yeah, that ending was really intriguing. I think Isabella being possessed was also interesting because when we started with Layton, she was just fine, so it makes you wonder what's going on. And other than that, it's just your standard Ace Attorney case that's really fun. The case doesn't overstay its welcome, the two witnesses were fun enough, so yeah, if I had to put this case on my tier list where I rank the cases, it would go in the good tier. Next up, we're in for a treat because the Fire Witch Trial is a fantastic case. I like how the case has so much more detail to it. The case makes sure we figure out every small detail to get to the end conclusion, and I think that made the entire case feel more tight and more fleshed out. I also like the use of multiple witnesses and how we question their memories. I like the arguments between the multiple witnesses. It made for some fun banter in the case. And I also like the time when the surprise 5th witness arrives and all the witnesses reunite. It was a good use of the minor characters as they worked well in a group even if they weren't that interesting individually. I found the multiple witnesses mechanic kind of pointless in this case. It gets expanded on in the later two cases, but it doesn't serve much of a purpose here. However, I did like the mechanic where you can find contradictions between witnesses' testimonies. That is a fun mechanic even though it's only a tutorial in this case. I also like the use of the gallery. They really made it feel like the world was against you, and Phoenix starting off as a baker and then slowly awakening his true self was also really cool. And finally, I think Kira was a really cool villain for this case. I liked how she slowly started to break down, and I like her motive a lot. She's seen as evil just because of the way she's born, and she has to hide that identity of hers, and live in fear that she'll potentially be killed just because she's a witch. It was a really powerful motive, and her execution scene was very powerful as she starts screaming and is thrown into the fire. It's a really good way to show how messed up Labyrinthia is, and overall the trial was just consistently great. I'd put this case in the phenomenal tier. Next we have the Golden Court. This case was alright at the start, like it was good but I wasn't feeling it too much. I thought there were some points in which Phoenix made an argument that I would never think of making just to make the case move in a certain way. I think one part of the case that I really liked early on was the parrot cross-examination. That was a good connection between the two series, since it used the iconic parrot cross-examination in Ace Attorney, combined with Luke's ability to talk to animals. And it made for a funny cross-examination that also served its purpose in the case. But the case truly picks up at the halfway point. I like the whole fake out with the poison. Like initially it looks like he was poisoned, but then they say it was tomato juice, and then they go back to the poison, which I thought was really clever. I also thought Amir having the poison container on him was a cool setup and payoff. I like Jean's character. I don't know how to pronounce that name, but you know who I'm talking about, the butler. Her character and story also played into the idea that these people are essentially just discriminated against because of how they were born. Her story with Belduc was also well done, and like in case 1, I think the unsolved mystery in this case is very interesting. The gallery is well done again, and we get to see that we're finally starting to change the opinions of some of the citizens. I also like the ending cutscene a lot. Isabella volunteering to take Grey Earl's place to end the witch trials, and then Maya rushing in to save Isabella. and getting taken in the flames was a really crazy scene. It was very impactful, so I think this case goes in the great tier. And finally, we have the final witch trial, or the Great Witch Trial. I forgot the exact name, but this trial is pretty disappointing. Now, I did hear some spoilers about this game before playing it. I remember that Kiro was the name of one of the culprits, and I heard the same about Grey Earl. The Grey Earl one was somewhat misleading, but I understand. But the last thing I heard is technically not a spoiler, but it was a very popular opinion, and that was that the ending to this game was really bad. And oh man, I have to agree. The plot twists were very ridiculous, and I did not enjoy them at all. I know this is common for Layton, and I have played the first 4 Layton games. It's been a while, so I don't remember how crazy they were, but I feel like the twists in this game were on another level of ridiculousness. Like the explanation for how magic doesn't exist, and all of the explanations for how these events happen, have so much wrong with them, and it just feels like a contrived way to explain these unrealistic events. I think it would have been much better to make magic actually exist and keep some of the supernatural elements. That being said, I did like the story with Espella and Eve in the bell tower. It's a tragic story, and I think Layton knows how to pull these off, even if the details surrounding that emotional story aren't that good. However, I will say the Fire Witch Trial did keep my interest from beginning to end. I like the 10 witness testimony. I feel like it was a good way to make use of the witness reaction mechanic, because you have to deduce who you need to talk to or else you'll waste time. As of writing this video, I'm still not sure how to feel about the witness reaction system, and I'll elaborate why when I review the cases in more detail in the future. The case also felt like it dragged on near the end. Overall, I think the final witch trial is either decent or good. As for the puzzles, I think they were fun. Just like any other Layton game, these were very fun to solve. My only issue with the puzzles was that there weren't many puzzles where you could lose Pickerats. I feel like the Pickerats were a good reward to try solve some of the puzzles in one try. But in this game, there were barely any puzzles where you could lose Pickerats in the first place, so it didn't feel as satisfying to solve some of the puzzles. I also feel like a lot of the Pickerat numbers were all over the place for the puzzles. A lot of the Pickerat numbers felt totally off for their actual difficulty, and I know that's a subjective thing to some extent, but seriously, some of these made no sense. A good example is the dragon puzzle. There's no way that's 60 Pickerats. And the final puzzle is nowhere near 90 Pickerats. I definitely think the stomping puzzles and the one sliding puzzle were a lot more difficult than these. So yeah, the Pickerat numbers are a little off in this one. Still, the puzzles are very fun and increase the game's overall quality. You know that infamous IGN Spirit of Justice review, where the guy says that Spirit of Justice should add something interesting to their investigations like puzzles? And as funny as that review was, I can see where he's coming from. One of the biggest weaknesses in Ace Attorney for me is that the games can feel like a slog at times. And I say this for both the investigations and trials. The witch trials changed up the formula and had good pacing, so those were not boring at all. So that leaves the investigations. Puzzles are a great way to make investigations constantly fun just because of all the gameplay in between investigations. This is why I felt like Professor Layton vs. Phoenix Wright never got boring. The game was fun to play all the way through. Even the ending, that felt a bit long-winded, kept me invested. Essentially, this game negated what I felt were the weaknesses of the Ace Attorney series. However, I feel like the weaknesses of the Layton side of the game still exist. The biggest weakness is obviously the insane ending, but there are also a lot of convenient moments that happen out of nowhere during the Layton segments, and that's another problem I remember having with the Layton games. As for the characters, I think they did a good job with the main cast. It wasn't anything crazy, but the main cast seemed to act how you think they would, and I like how we got different combinations. We got every possible combination between the 4 main characters, and it was really fun to watch to see each combination of characters talk to each other. I think Espella could have been a lot better than she was. She was very boring, and in a sense, I can see why they made her like that, considering her story. That being said, even with her backstory, I don't think Espella has to be the way she is. She definitely could have been more interesting, but I do think the final witch trial did a good job with her story and character at the end. The same goes for Eve. I think they at least did something at the end which was good, so the character work is one of the stronger points of the final trial. However, I wasn't a fan of Barnum. I thought he was fine, but he got written off in case 4, and as a result, I think he's easily one of the worst prosecutors. Overall, the game's still good. I had a blast playing it. So yeah, comment down what you guys think about this game. And yeah, that's about it.